Who decides what's true? And what happens when they're wrong? Let's talk about it. Truth has always been shaped by those in power and is about the most unstatic thing there could possibly be in our universe. But if you only thought there was one truth and one reality, you might want to watch the rest of this video because there'll be some things that'll surprise you. Galileo wasn't put under house arrest by the church because he thought that the earth went around the sun. He was charged with heresy because those thoughts, because those ideas contradicted those of the church. Today, governments and platforms, and even major media institutions define what is truth and what is misinformation, and this completely changes how we look at the world and the things that are happening within it. Truth is no longer discovered or found or broadcast, it is managed. But I think before we go into the whole discussion over who controls truth and how is it miscontrolled, we need to discuss what is it, because there are foundations that people completely miss when discussing this topic. And I think the first people you go to are the philosophers. What are the first principles of truth? You can go into epistemology and analyze what is it to have knowledge? What is knowledge? What does that even mean? And the fact that we all have different inputs, we all have different microphones, whether it be our ears, whether it be our noses, that pick up different sensory inputs in different ways, means that there is no one perception of reality. That whatever this existence is gets interpreted very differently by every single living being on Earth. You think a frog sees the world the same way that we do and sees it the same way that a bat does? And this doesn't even account for the fact of the internal workings of us. Some people like the taste of some foods and some people like the taste of other foods. All these different micro differences completely change how reality is perceived and what it even is. But if we put the philosophers aside and operate on a pragmatic truth, right? You don't need to understand quantum physics to play catch with your friend. Nor does a scientist need to observe every single possible situation to get a good enough idea of what happens when you put something under a certain pressure or context. So if there is no such thing as literal truth, and pragmatic truth can be manipulated at will, who benefits from controlling exactly what this is, and why would they do it? One of the most devastating recent examples of this pragmatic truth being manipulated would have to be the Iraq War. Up to 1 million people died, and what? For this lie that was told about the existence of weapons of mass destruction. It was convenient at the time for the US and its allies to perpetuate this truth, so they would give them justifications for invading sovereign territory. So what happened when people finally started questioning this truth, and putting out their own versions of reality out there, whether they were a journalistic publication or a whistleblower? At best, they were prosecuted for years on end, and at worst, they were imprisoned and put in solitary confinement for the mere crime of protecting the citizens of the earth and putting out an alternate, but definitely more accurate version of reality. When governments and media institutions work so closely together, they end up becoming part of the greater institution of people protecting each other. That when the government has a certain message that it needs to put out into the world, the legacy media institutions will oblige. And we saw that with the rise of the Palestinian genocide as Israel started invading and killing civilians, is that the Western press went along the same lines that the Israeli government was putting out there and just started justifying the conflict, despite all of the horrific reports that were coming out of the region from local independent reporters. And it's not just legacy media distributors who are meant to be the arbiters of information and truth, but also platforms as well that played a part in suppressing the truth. If it wasn't for whistleblowers like Catherine Gunn, Chelsea Manning, David McBride, Edward Snowden, and Julian Assange, our version of reality, our perception of the world, would be completely different. So now you see why governments and major legacy media organizations have a benefit in controlling what we deem as true and what we indeed know about our world. Because once the official lie is allowed to spread, it becomes incredibly hard to stop and unwind, especially if there are elements of truth or fear that play into that tie very close to home for people. And then anyone who dares to question that is either anti-Semitic, hater of the country, a communist if you're going back to the Red Scare days, anything that would oppose the status quo. So when platforms and governments can lie without consequence, what does this mean for the truth? I just wanted to jump in here and say that if you like what you're watching, you can click the first link down in the description where you'll receive 1 email per week from my newsletter, where you can learn how is the media industry impacting our world, what it means for our future, and what you can do about it so you can stay empowered and stay ahead. So click that first link down in the description, completely free, and on to the rest of the video. In theory, these places are meant to be held accountable, because governments can be unelected and platforms can be, through the shareholders, through the board, kicked out members of senior leadership. But does this ever happen? Not really. There is only one state in Australia that outlaws lying in political ads, which is just absurd. Just look at Clive Palmer spending $100 million on a campaign in Australia that didn't win him any votes. He didn't win him a single seat in Parliament, but it's just there to muddy the waters enough to get his preferred candidates elected. If he'd just given $4 to every single citizen, given them a cup of coffee each, it probably would have won him more votes. But once again, that was not the point. The point was to control what is deemed truth, what is deemed reality, and what issues the voter should focus on. Too often you see the media put out there, this is the frame of debate, this is the frame of discussion, here's the issues that people are up in arms about and really caring about. And you look at it, you're like, I don't think anyone cares about that. No one of my friends has ever mentioned that, no one of my friends has ever talked about that. But it's very particular what issues they want you to focus on. It's not about what is the havoc that the climate crisis will wreak on our world, it's about how much will solving the climate crisis cost. It's like, that's irrelevant once you actually know the damage it will wreak and the people that it will harm. There is a reason that the US government wanted to shut down TikTok. They like to argue that it's for national security concerns, and sure, that might be partially true, even though most of their arguments don't stack up. But one of the major reasons, which started coming out as Congress people publicly talked about it, was that they couldn't control the messaging around the Middle East, and that it was being exposed the havoc and the genocide that they were indeed fueling. So when governments and legacy media organizations can't control the messaging, they then start going after the people spreading it, whether it be the aforementioned whistleblowers, whether it be China arresting journalists in Hong Kong, or going after the non-American platforms in the first place. Even now, you start seeing the crackdown on the protesters, who have not committed any crime, who have not been charged with any crime, but have been detained and shifted away from their family regardless, because they're in an all-out attempt to suppress any opposing voices. But I thought this internet thing was meant to liberate us, right? It was meant to be a fueling of free speech that anyone can say anything. And I think there's an argument to be had over where do we want reasonable restrictions, right? You don't want hate speech, you don't want threatening of violence, and most Western legislation around the world accounts for that. But as we move into an era of AI, back in the beginning, I was talking to my dad. He was saying the shift from having to go to the library and engage in research and look through every book, to then moving to search algorithms, felt like that not only you were cheating, but could potentially miss out on certain information that this algorithm is feeding you, rather than you going by hand and selecting yourself. And how that shift is very similar to what we're seeing today, with AI algorithms taking over not only how we see our information, but which information is shown to us in the first place. At best, it is the articles that are chosen. At worst, it is writing the information flat out. I've been helping with ChatGPT to help me write the bulk of some of the things that I put out there, except I found that it just has a perpetual ability to lie with full confidence about that. I'm like, cool, can you write an article about this person? And it just completely gets the name wrong, gets the date wrong. I even tried Claude, that was way worse. The point being, they're horrible arbiters of information, and when people assume accuracy, when people assume what they're reading is correct and is an accurate representation of truth in the world, that's when things go wrong. There is an argument to be had that people are far more educated and aware in oppressive regimes, because there is no expectation that the media that is on television is true. There is a default expectation that indeed is controlled by the government, and that is the exact messaging that they want you to hear. Versus in the West, where there is this perception, there is this narrative that we do have a free press, that we do have a functioning fourth estate, when we couldn't be further from the truth. And while human gatekeepers can wield horrible downsides, they also acted as arbiters of truth, arbiters of quality of information. Is this worth going out there? Does it have enough evidence? Does it have enough backing? Because our reputation is on the line, and we could be made a mockery of if we get this wrong. But AI don't have those consequences. They can put out whatever information they want, regardless of its accuracies, with full confidence, because they don't have the same level of reputation to lose or job to lose. So not only does it come with the human biases of the information that has been input into the system, it also comes with the AI biases that arise out of collating numerous articles together, writing as if it's one thing, and once again with full confidence saying, this is the answer. So now we got to ask, who is controlling that AI? And for what purpose? We believed that OpenAI was going to be this not-for-profit to help the world, until they saw that big paycheck and they changed up very quickly. So in a world where governments lie, media spins, and AI guesses, how do we know what's true anymore? Court cases are already troubled with faulty evidence. Just look back to one of the most famous cases in Australian history with Lindy Chamberlain, Dingo Ate My Baby, who was prosecuted and imprisoned for 3 years on false charges. Imagine in a world now where you can create seamless deep fakes, how many people will put behind bars because of malicious intent. So what can we do about it? What can we do to ensure that we stay empowered in an ever-changing information distributing environment? I think there are 4 things that we can do in particular that ensure that we stay in control. 1 is question the narrative. What is the story that they are telling? Why are they telling it? What motives do they have to focus on this perspective? And are there any perspectives in particular that they're conveniently ignoring? The second is to diversify your information sources. Don't just get all of your news from one source. Follow multiple independent journalists, multiple news organizations from around the world. Often organizations like Al Jazeera are considered the most accurate when it comes to anything that opposes the US because they are not susceptible to Western control. But you wouldn't necessarily trust them when it comes to domestic affairs. So it is essential that you gather information from a variety of sources, from a variety of people who come from a variety of backgrounds and perspectives to ensure that you can see the whole playing field. And this includes listening to whistleblowers because they're the only people who have risked everything for nothing. The fact that people like David McBride and Chelsea Manning were prosecuted and imprisoned for the mere crime of trying to serve the people that they vowed to serve as members of the military is absurd. That questioning an order is deemed more important and more of a crime than helping out your common man and spreading the truth about the crimes that are being committed overseas. 3 is to think critically about search algorithms and AI. What are the processes that go into it? Why is it making certain decisions about the information it is showing you? And being very much aware that this is not the entire field of truth, that this is not all the perspectives of everything that is happening, that very much whoever is control of the levers is telling you exactly what information you should be receiving. And 4 is to stay engaged. The worst thing that we can do, and the thing that they want above all else, is for us to be apathetic, for us to take in whatever information we are being given unquestioningly and live a life as if that is the truth. When in reality, we should stay on our toes. We should constantly be looking at what are all the alternate perspectives, why are they trying to tell us what they are telling us, and constantly be skeptical. But not too skeptical, because at some point you start going into conspiracy theories, but making sure you actually understand who's talking to you and why. Truth has never been static. It is always something that has been debated, evolved, whether you take it from a first principles philosophical perspective or you take it from a pragmatic, what is actually happening in our world. But in an era where AI and media oligarchs can shape the information that we receive and how we perceive reality, our responsibility to seek it out and find it is more important than ever. The fight now isn't just about trying to find out what truth is, but protecting the right to even ask. When opposition is squashed, imprisoned, and deported, you know that they are probably doing something right, that they have made enemies in the right places, in the places that we want to be scared. So remain vigilant, don't get apathetic, and focus on all of the points that are discussed to empower yourself moving into this new era. If you want more videos like this, I have the perfect playlist for you right here, where you can delve into learning more about our world and how it operates.